take the roll, please.
Mr. Klein? Mr. Ratner? Mr. Reber? Mr. Diner? Mr. Lewis? Ms. Gucci is not present. Ms. Begoli?
Here.
Ms. Vishnu? Mrs. Santola? Chairman Fernandez?
Here.
We have our quorum. We have our board attorney, assistant township engineer, our planner, and our planning coordinator, Catherine Madry.
Thank you very much, Jackie. If you can please call the first matter.
The first matter scheduled for this evening is preliminary and final site plan with variances for 644 Route 10, Block 100, Lot 2, application number 2020-36-PFSPV, an amendment for Insight Development Partners, LLC.
Thank you, and welcome. Just to go through the general procedure for tonight's hearing, the applicant is represented by an attorney who will explain the application. The applicant's attorney will call one or more witnesses to give sworn testimony in support of the application. When all the applicant's witnesses have testified, if there's any entity or group appearing as a party in support or in opposition to the application, that party may call witnesses. When all the witnesses of all parties have been heard, members of the public may give sworn statements for or against the application. So thank you. If you can enter your appearance for the record, please.
Thank you. My name is Tim Arch. I'm an attorney licensed in the state of New Jersey from Bob Smith & Associates. I'm here representing Insight Development on this amended preliminary and final site plan. This is what I like to think of as a relatively straightforward application. We received approval for a self-storage site at that location. It has now been constructed. It is completed. As part of that approval, there are long-term vehicle spaces there for people to store vehicles. And currently, they are uncovered. They're exposed to the elements on evenings such as this. And we would like to put up two canopy structures that span over top of the long-term parking to shelter those vehicles from the elements. When we initially, there's two things that I want to sort of clarify before we get into it. When we initially filed this application, the intent was to provide solar arrays on those canopies. We've had discussions with, or my client has had discussions with his solar provider, and we haven't finalized if we are going to be placing solar panels on those canopies, or if we're going to have them on the roof, or if it's going to be some combination thereof. And so we can't commit to say that there will be solar on those canopies at this time. We do want to pursue this for the purposes of getting the canopies for the shelter. It may be sometime in the future when we finalize plans with the solar provider that we may be coming back in front of you to ask for solar panels. We may have some on the roof. We just have to work out what the most efficient way is to utilize those panels, whether it's roof or canopies or some combination thereof. Okay. So that was the first thing. The other was, and this was brought up in the planning report, there is one minor variance that was called out as a potential variance in the planner's report, and I just want to place it on the record because I think it does apply, and I think that we do want to address it. And that is under your ordinance 170-87E. For accessory buildings in non-residential districts. And specifically, there is a requirement that no accessory building shall be closer to the principal building or any abutting property line than the height of said accessory building. The canopies are approximately 20 feet high. The building from the point where the canopies end to the building is over 40 feet. So that obviously applies, but there is an existing projection, an existing sort of canopy, I guess, that comes off of the building for loading and unloading to provide shelter for that. And that does extend out to where the canopies begin at about 6 feet. So we would be asking for a variance. Again, we wouldn't need it for actually the face of the building, but if you measure from where the projection is, we would require it there. Apart from that, there are no other variances for this application. It is simply a straightforward site plan. Just for the record, I do have, as I alluded to, 2 reports. I have one from the engineering department that is dated October 24th, 2023. And I also have one from Beacon Planning that is dated October 12th, 2023. Those are the reports that we'll be referencing in our testimony. I do have only one witness tonight, and that is Louisa Gazzelli, who is our engineer from Dynamic Engineering. So unless there's any other questions of me, I'm ready to begin.
What is the actual dimension?
The actual, so it would be the way that the code is written, the variance would be that instead of 20 feet away, because that would be the approximate height of the canopy, so you would need to also have 20 feet to the principal building, is that we would be 6 feet.
You're proposing 6 feet or 14 feet?
We are proposing a
The variance would be 14 feet, right? Because you're...
Yes, the variance, yes, sorry. Took me a second to process that.
It took me a
but
second
yes.
too, don't worry. It's not-
The variance would be for 14 feet, correct.
And the spelling of your name?
Louisa Guazzelli, it's spelled Guazzeli.
Thank you. You may call your first witness.
Louisa Gazzelli would be my first witness.
Can you, do you want to administer the oath?
Yes. You raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Just repeat your full name and your business affiliation for the record.
Yep, my name is Louisa Guazzelli. I am affiliated with Dynamic Engineering. I'm a project manager of the company with business located at 1904 Main Street in Lake Como, New Jersey, 07719. I have over 5 years of experience with the company, and I am a licensed professional engineer in good standing in New Jersey.
Should,
Any other questions on her professional qualifications?
Ms. Guazzelli, you're familiar with this site plan and with this site, correct?
Correct. I'm very familiar with the site and also had direct oversight of the engineering plans and reports that were submitted to the board.
Okay. I would ask that Ms. Guazzelli be accepted as a engineer.
Expert in engineering. Any questions from the board? Any objection? Thank you. Accepted as an expert in engineering.
So Ms. Guazzelli, if you can please just take us through the site, and if you want to hit upon any of the items in the staff reports as well, that would be appreciated.
Absolutely. We actually have a few renderings, so I'm just going to jump over to the computer and bring them up.
And Ms. Guazzelli, before we get into this, these are colorized renderings of the plans that were previously submitted, is that correct?
That's correct.
Would we need to mark these since they're colorized?
Yeah, those are similar but colorized?
Correct.
They're exactly the
Yes,
same.
we
just
mark them
colored.
as A1.
Okay.
Perfect. So this is the aerial map exhibit prepared by Dynamic Engineering, dated November 16th, 2023. Exhibit A1. Just for everyone's orientation, north is generally to the left of the page. So our property is Block 100, Lot 2. The address is 644 New Jersey State Route 10 in the Township of Livingston in Essex County, New Jersey. The property is in the northwestern edge of the municipality, immediately adjacent to East Hanover, and the property size is about 4.49 acres. Brief history of the site. It's been developed as far back as the 1950s, and like our attorney mentioned, we did come before the board on April 6, 2021 to obtain approval for the construction of a 3-story self-storage building. Construction was completed in the first quarter of 2023, and the self-storage building has been operational for a few months now. And like mentioned, we are now in front of you at the board to ask for a very simple application just to add canopies in the northern portion of the site where we have the RV and boat storage spaces. So existing site conditions, as I mentioned, we have the existing 3-story self-storage building in the southern portion of the site. Is approximately 41,785 square foot footprint with a total floor area of about 550 square feet. There is a small parking area in the southern portion of the site immediately adjacent to Route 10, and we also have the RV and boat storage in the northern portion of the site. As you can see, the majority of the site is already developed and it's mostly impervious coverage. We are in the CI, Commercial Industrial District, and also within the 644 New Jersey State Highway Route 10 Overlay District redevelopment area. Immediately north to the site, over here, we have the CI zone and also the 630 New Jersey State Highway Route 10 Overlay District. There is currently a multifamily residential project that is under construction, and immediately to the north of the site, this will be the future Spectrum 360 parking area for the school. To the east of our site, we have what is going to become the Spectrum 360 building, and that's also within the C1 zone. And then we have Ockner Parkway and commercial industrial uses beyond. To the south, we have B1 zone with New Jersey State Route 10 immediately adjacent to it, and then commercial and industrial uses beyond. And to the west, which is to the bottom of the page, we have the CI zone. There's an existing pump station, and then there's the Passaic River and some wooded areas immediately adjacent to that property line. And immediately after the Passaic River, that's where you have the township of East Hanover. That pretty much is a summary of the existing conditions of the site. So I'm just actually going to jump into the proposed conditions. This is the site plan rendering, also prepared by Dynamic Engineering, dated November 16th, 2023. Now mark this as Exhibit A2. This is also just a colorized version of the site plan that was already submitted to the board.
Well, you want to mark that just as A2 to be consistent since it's colorized?
Yep.
Yes.
Mark that as A2. This has the same orientation as the aerial map I just had on the screen, with north generally to the left of the page, just so everyone can get their bearings. Everything that's grayed out on the site are existing conditions. So this light brown is the existing 3-story self-storage building. The grayed out gray areas are the parking areas, and we have the RV trailer storage on the north portion of the site. And all the grayed out green spaces are landscape areas. All we're here for tonight is these 2 canopies on the northern portion of the site, and they're shown in dark brown in this exhibit. As Tim mentioned, we're here seeking amended preliminary and final site plan approval, and we did receive letters from the township engineer dated October 24th, 2023, and from the township planner dated October 12th, 2023, and I'll incorporate a lot of their comments into my direct testimony. As I mentioned, we're here seeking approval for 2 RV boat storage canopies, and we're just looking to provide an additional amenity to our existing users, protect their cars and vehicles and RVs from the elements. There will be very minor soil disturbance associated with the canopy structural supports and their footings. And we'll also be removing some existing area lights in this area, and we'll replace them with ceiling mounted lights underneath the canopy. The total limited disturbance associated with this application is about 4,300 square feet, and the area covered by the canopies is about 39,600 square feet. And as the attorney mentioned, the applicant is working with the solar designer to explore the feasibility of providing solar panels either on the canopies themselves or on the existing self-storage building. And if solar is provided, it will be designed to comply with the township requirements for the same. As for zoning, we are in the 644 New Jersey State Highway Route 10 Overlay District redevelopment area and also underlying CI zone. The self-storage facility is a permitted use, as well as outdoor storage is also permitted use. And as the attorney mentioned, we are completely compliant with all the bulk requirements of this area, except for the building separation setback. So let me actually zoom in here. So your ordinance requires that a separation equal to the height of the accessory building be provided between the accessory building and the principal building. So our canopies are about 20 feet in height, so that means that we need a 20-foot separation between the canopies and the existing buildings. As you can see here, roughly in the center of the site, we do provide 43.8 feet separation between the canopy to the main building. However, as Tim mentioned, we do have a canopy for temporary loading in the rear of the site, which at this pinch point, we do have approximately 6 feet between the existing canopy and the proposed canopy that we're proposing in the rear of the site. If this is considered a variance, it's technical in nature, and in our opinion, de minimis variance. It will have no impact on the site aesthetics, site circulation. These canopies are internal to the site, and they're just open-air canopies, so we don't see an issue with this variance. Once again, very simple application. We are proposing no changes to the existing parking, loading, access to the site, or circulation within the site. The canopies are located within the RV storage stalls and do not encroach into the drive aisles within the site, so there will be no impact to circulation. There's also no changes to the proposed grading, drainage, stormwater, utilities, landscaping, signage, or any of the site operations. As I mentioned, we're going to have very limited disturbance, and all the areas that are disturbed are going to be restored to existing grades to maintain the same drainage patterns that are on site right now. For lighting, as I mentioned, we are replacing the existing area lights located within the canopy areas with 12 ceiling-mounted lights that are going to be mounted on the canopy themselves. Overall, it's going to be a benefit as the lights are going to be more shielded from the adjacent uses and further hidden from view, and all the light levels are generally consistent with the previous approval. We did receive approval from the Essex County Planning Board for this project, as well as the Hudson, Essex, and Passaic Soil Conservation District, and we do have applications with the DEP pending for the proposed development. As I mentioned before, we did receive letters from the township engineer dated October 24th, 2023, and from the township planner dated October 12th, 2023. We'd had a chance to connect with the professionals prior to the hearing, and we have no issue addressing all their comments and working with them to address them. I believe I hit most of the comments within those letters in my direct testimony, but if there's any additional questions or topics that the professionals or the board would like me to touch on, I'd be happy to do so.
I have one or two quick questions for you. So I think you said this already, but from an engineering perspective, do you see any negative impact or any detriment from having that variance of 14 feet from the existing canopy to where we're positioning our canopies?
No, I do not.
Okay. And just based on the orientation here, the canopies themselves are essentially buffered by the building against any sight line to the surrounding roadway. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So there'll be no negative sight impact to any of the surrounding areas for this proposal.
Correct.
Okay. I have no further direct questions.
Please. Is the canopy flat or sloped?
It is sloped, and it generally meets the existing grades of the site.
And how will rainwater drain?
Right now, we are proposing to just have the water sheet flow off of those canopies. They are angled and they follow the site grading, so they're going to be routed to the existing inlets that are on site.
Will there be ice guards on the canopy?
I'm sorry?
Will there be ice guards on the canopy?
Not to my knowledge at this point, but we are still working with the canopy designer to prepare a full structural plans for the same.
Is there any need to address a risk of freezing on the driveway?
I don't believe so. Under existing conditions, all the stormwater runoff is just going directly into the driveway. Now it's just going to be a matter of hitting those canopies, but it's still going to be routed to the same locations that they were previously.
Do you know, by looking at your plan, what the width of the driveway between the two is?
30 feet.
Okay, so it's more than half the height.
Yes,
Of the
that's
canopy.
correct. We do meet that separation between the two canopies.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Please refresh my memory. The parking lot has no charging stations at this point?
I believe we do have 2 charging stations in the front of the site, adjacent to Route 10.
You have 2 for the, and you have no plans to increase that because of the work, this work being done?
Not at this time. We have we have limited parking in the front of the site, and we are complying with the state regulations for the number of
I know
electric
that.
vehicle
Thank you.
regulations.
I just have a quick, I think it's a great service to obviously give your customers some protection, especially if they store their vehicles, you know, for long periods of time. Just for education, you went through a lot of process to consider solar on the top. So I'm just curious, why would you take it off? Is it not effective? I mean, maybe you don't have the answer. Is it not, I mean, what's the reason not to put?
Again, it's not that we're indicating that there may not be solar there. It's that we're still working with the solar provider to figure out what scheme works best for the overall site. To just basically put solar panels on something without doing an analysis of where it's the most efficient, based on the site, based on different angles, times of day, all that sort of stuff has to go into it. And it's sort of a comprehensive process. If you don't do it right, you really end up spending a lot of money and getting very little back. And with most of these renewable projects, you want to really make sure that you are maximizing the amount that you're getting from it. So it may be in the future, again, that they may be a portion of the canopies have it, but again, we're still working with that provider. And we just wanted to make it clear that we don't know if we can commit to any solar at this time, just because we're still in that process. So we didn't want to mislead you to say, hey, look, we're putting up, you know, these grand solar arrays there, and then come back and say, oops, you know, we didn't put up solar arrays. We're still in the process of figuring that out. So we just don't want to mislead the board.
Looking at the architecturals, it looks like on the 2 rows that there's actually a series of canopies as it steps down with the grade.
Yes.
Does each one overlap and drain onto the next one so that there's like, is all the water going to run off the very back, or is it going to run off in between?
So it actually slopes both ways. So it slopes kind of to the west and to the north, similar to the site. So grading kind of goes this way. So it will slope this way from pretty much east to west, and also from south to north. So it won't just discharge all the way to the north of the site.
Okay. And where the current drainage, there's drainage in that center aisle if it's dumping into the, okay,
Correct, yep.
thank you.
Any other board members?
I got one quick question. Is there any parking spaces lost by the supports holding up the canopies? And if so, how many? And does that affect the parking requirement?
Not at this time. We do have a note on our plan saying that the structural support columns' exact locations are to be determined with the canopy designer. So we are going to be working with them to make sure they are located in locations within striping so that we do not lose any RV storage spaces.
Okay, right now, bad eyes can't read that small. Obviously, you're not asking for a variance, so that there is no parking requirement now. How does your requirement meet with the code so that potentially if there was a loss because of the structural, are you over-parked?
Yeah, so we actually have, we are required a total of 18 parking spaces on site, and we have 26 existing. And the only requirement that we have is for the regular parking stalls in the front of the site for passenger vehicles. There is really no requirement for RV and boat storage, so these are just extra for long-term storage.
Right, so in that case, if you were to lose any space back there, you just lose revenue.
Yep, exactly.
Correct. Thank you.
Nothing. Anything from our engineers, planners? Anything not addressed that needs to be addressed?
The rear canopy is suspended, right? There's no footings associated with the ends of it?
The existing canopy?
Yes.
We do have a footing over here and another one on this side of the drive aisle.
Okay, does that impact your circulation at all, or the proposed canopies?
No, it doesn't, because the trucks drive through this drive aisle and they will go underneath the canopy, either to the east or the west of the site.
Okay.
And to that end, the existing canopy off the building, that was part of the original application, I believe, and that was already reviewed with the fire
Yes.
department and ability to go through an emergency.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
Okay.
And the lighting is inside the canopy coming downlit?
Yes, so it will be ceiling mounted.
Rocco, is there anything that wasn't addressed in your letter?
I believe there's just a couple minor things that they would, we talked about earlier today that they would just address as part of the condition.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any questions from the public for this witness? Seeing none. Do you have any other witnesses?
No, only witness.
Any closing remarks?
Just
Well, actually, let me, is there anybody from the public that wishes to make a sworn statement for or against the application? Okay, seeing none, I'm sorry.
I would just state that I think it's a fairly straightforward proposal. What we're asking for, again, we're providing what we think is really a beneficial amenity for the people that are going to be utilizing the space. Really don't see any detriments to it. We've gone through with your professionals, and we agree to work with them as a condition of approval if we are granted approval. And we certainly thank you for your time.
Thank you. The parties, having had the opportunity to make closing statements, it appears to the chair that the applicant, all interested persons, and the board members have had reasonable opportunity to be heard, and that the evidentiary record of this hearing ought to be closed. Absent objection, and in the absence of a motion for continuance, the evidentiary record is closed. No further testimony or evidence shall be heard. Board members now shall have the opportunity to state and discuss their views on the application prior to a decision.
I'd make a motion to approve the application. I think that hopefully we'll get this solar as well, but I think it's an excellent amenity if you have a boat or an RV. Seems to me like that would be where you'd want to put it so that it's not exposed to the elements 24/7. So I would move to approve.
I would second that with adding the variance that has been requested.
We have a motion and a second. Any other thoughts or comments?
No, only I'm not 100% convinced it is a variance, because I'm not sure if that canopy counts as part of the principal building, but I think erring on the side of caution include it, and I would agree.
Yeah, I agree that it's a precautionary variance.
Precautionary variance, is that in the MLUL?
We'll make it up.
I don't know if that's detailed in the land use book yet, but I'll have
Sure,
to
it's
add
there
it.
somewhere. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Jackie?
Mrs. Santola,
Yes.
Mr. Klein,
Yes.
Mr. Ratner,
Yes.
Mr. Reaper, Mr. Diner,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis, Ms. Begoli,
Yes.
Ms. Wishnew, and you're voting for Ms. Cucci, and Chairman Fernandez.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. Enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you so much.
Have a good holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank
But
you.
tell,
Everybody get home safe.
tell Senator Smith that we missed the opportunity to see him again.
The next matter scheduled for this evening is preliminary and final site plan with variances for 505 South Livingston Avenue, Block 2700, Lot 55, Application number 2022-61-PFSPV, Devon Partners LLC, doing business as Northfield Dental Group.
Not yet. All right, we'll have to, okay. So I guess we should do that before we start.
Otherwise,
Thank you. And I'm not going to repeat the process again. Everybody heard it, so why don't we just move forward?
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael LaParry. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Mandelbaum Barrett. I'm counsel to the applicant, Devan Partners LLC. We are before you this evening seeking preliminary and final major site plan approval with a couple of associated bulk variances to allow the applicant to convert an existing dilapidated building into a brand-new dental medical office at the premises known as 505 South Livingston Avenue. The site was formerly occupied by the Trans Shop, which was a transmission oil change operation. As our engineer will describe in greater detail when he testifies, the site is very unique in shape and size. It shares a demising wall with the neighboring restaurant. And as a result of these site constraints, the applicant is seeking a bulk variance for the minimum drive aisle width, where 22 feet is required and 10.1 feet is currently existing and is proposed to remain. In addition, your board planner had indicated that there may be some variances for the number of signs. She had calculated or counted 5 signs. We had counted 3. We'll get more into the details when our experts testify, and hopefully we can come to some resolution on that. As well as the number of parking spaces. We believe that 16 are required, and we're providing 17. There is some unfinished second-story storage space that may or may not require an additional 6 spaces. We don't believe it does. Perhaps we can get one of those precautionary variances, but we will certainly get into it a little bit more when we have our professionals testify. Other than that, all we are seeking is a design waiver for landscaping in the rear of the property, and our engineer will go over that too. It's a pretty much fully developed site and with limited area for any of the landscaping that might be required, and a design waiver is likely to be required. So again, we'll get into all that with our professionals. But the one thing I'd like to raise briefly before I call any of my witnesses is that we understand that there are concerns with the drive aisle width, and prior to, or way back when Dr. Stein of Devan Partners had purchased the property, he approached the neighbor to investigate whether or not he would be able to get an easement, grant an easement, and those negotiations were unsuccessful. When we appeared a while back at the track hearing, the issue came up again, and so we took a little time and we tried to restart those negotiations, and we got pretty far along, and what we had intended was that there would be an entrance only on South Livingston Ave, and that the cars would go through the property to the rear of the property where there's sort of adjacent parking lot to the property on the right. So they would exit out the back of that property onto East Northfield Ave, and that would be a one-way in, one-way out. Unfortunately, during the negotiations, they stalled because there was an issue with the neighboring property that could not be resolved, and those negotiations had stalled. So as a result of the neighboring property issues, we have no opportunity for that easement, and the only opportunity we have is to move forward and request a variance from this board. Regardless of that, we think this is a really a great application. It'll be a huge upgrade to that property that's been sitting there, and it'll be an upgrade to that area as a whole. So I just wanted to get that out of the way so that we had a little bit of that background that we, we were doing our best to try to alleviate that, but we were unable to due to circumstances outside of our control. But with that, the witnesses I have this evening is first I will call Dr. Ivan Stein on behalf of the applicant, Devon Partners. We also have our project engineer, Matthew Wilder with Morgan Engineering. Our project architect is Mark Teichman. And then we have a traffic engineer and professional planner, Matthew Seckler with Stonefield Engineering and Design. So unless the board has any questions or
I think there's one.
Before we get started,
Yes.
I don't know if you received our planner's report, but there was an issue raised about the proposed height of the building. It appeared there were two different numbers given.
Yes, so we've eliminated that variance. We're not seeking a variance for the height of the building. It will be below the required, the maximum height restriction, and our architect will discuss that.
Do you have the actual number, or it hasn't been designed yet?
No, it's designed, it's whatever was on, I think there was, the engineering plans kept the old number, the architectural plans were revised, and I can ask what that number is real quick. Do you know what the number of the height?
As long as they'll address it during their testimony,
Yeah,
that's fine.
I'll address it, but we're not seeking a variance.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So the first witness I'd like to call is Dr. Ivan Stein, a member of Devon Partners. Mr. Stein, you need to be sworn?
You want him sworn?
Yes, please.
Okay. Could you raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Right. Please give us your full name and spell your last name, please.
Yep, Dr. Ivan Stein, S-T-E-I-N. I've been a practicing dentist for the past 37 years. We're not a regular dental practice. I specialize in head, neck, and jaw maladies, specifically TMJ headaches and sleep apnea. We have 2 patents on devices that we've developed for sleep apnea instead of using a CPAP machine. So we kind of a little bit of a unique type of dental practice.
And Dr. Stein, can you please just give the board a little bit of the intent you have for your new location at 505 South Livingston Ave?
Well, we are looking to treat patients by appointment only for migraine, headache, TMJ, and sleep apnea maladies.
And the entities that would be operating, Devon Partners would be the owner of the property, and the actual, I guess, tenant or entity that would be operating out of the property would be who?
Would be the Northfield Dental Group, which is also part of the Headache and TMJ Center of New Jersey, which is also part of New Jersey Sleep Apnea Solutions. So all the businesses kind of go into each other.
And as far as operations, can you tell the board what your anticipated hours of operation are at the site?
Yep, Mondays are from 9 to 2 p.m. Tuesdays are from 9 to 6. Wednesdays are from 9 to 7. Thursdays are from 9 to 3, and Fridays are 9 to 2. There's no Saturday or Sunday hours.
Okay. And how many doctors will you have at the location at any given time?
2.
2. And I think you indicated, but this is appointments only,
Correct.
and there's no walk-ins?
There's no walk-ins.
And how often will each doctor be seeing patients? How frequently?
The appointing times are between 45 minutes and an hour for each visit.
Okay, so there'll be 2 doctors on site, and each will be seeing one patient every 45 minutes to an hour?
Correct.
Okay. I don't have any further questions of Dr. Stein.
What's your total staff, please?
There will be 2 people at the front desk. We have 3 assistants. We have 1 hygienist and 2 doctors.
8 times 8.
That's correct.
Can you explain again the relationship? You started off saying you've got the group.
Right.
Then you say that TMJ is part of the group, and then you say New Jersey Sleep Apnea is part of TMJ.
Correct. All of these, Northfield Dental Group is the owner of, quote-unquote, New Jersey Sleep Apnea Solutions, and is also the owner, quote-unquote, of the Headache and TMJ Center of New Jersey. Both of those require a dentist to be the practitioner for that problem. So we are one business, but we have 3 identifications.
And as one business, how many employees plus professionals are there?
Well, we have a total of 4 doctors, but there are never more than 2 at the practice at any one time. And then we have, as we just discussed, 8 in staff with the doctors there. There would be a total of 8 people in the building at any one time.
No, but in terms of total staff, what have you got?
We have 2 people at the front desk. We have 3 assistants, 2 doctors, and 1 hygienist.
How do you make the public aware of your existence?
Well, if you have this type of problem, you'll find us. I can promise you that. There are not very many people that do the type of treatment that I do.
Do I go online?
Yes, you could go online. We have a very big presence online. If you put that in, we'll come right up right away.
And you have an online presence for the group, or do you have an online presence for one of the sub-practices?
We have an online presence for the group. We also do teleconferencing. I do international consults as well as domestic consults.
The reason I ask is I did go looking for you online, and I saw very impressive material.
Thank you.
Professionally, incredible.
Thank you.
When I looked at the website for the group, there was a photograph of a large number of people. It seems to be larger than the number that you've just stated.
Correct. That was not what it is today. Correct.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Yeah.
And when I saw the video for one of the other parts of the practice, it was the same photograph
Correct.
again,
Right.
which
It's also
confirms
dated.
your thought that everybody is covering all the aspects of the practice.
Right. I was also a little younger, too, in that photo, as you saw.
Clarification, please. On the graphics, on the plans, on the back, you have Northfield Dental Group. Will you or will you not be doing traditional dental work?
We do some minor traditional dental work.
But if I need a crown, is that a minor or a major?
We consider that to be minor. A crown is not a big procedure. Surgery is a bigger procedure.
Well, I don't know. Okay.
Minor surgery is when it's on somebody else.
That's for sure.
Any other questions from the board? How many examinations have?
I think we have, well, we have two examination rooms, and the rest are all treatment rooms. They're specific to the procedures that we're doing in each of those rooms. So it's not like I could take a crown and put it into this room, that room, and that room. It would basically go into one room.
So there are specific types of practice for which specific rooms are used?
That's correct. Procedures, that's correct.
So I guess the concern that everyone's sort of around, if there's multiple treatment rooms and you're busy, you could have 3 or 4 docs there on a day.
We don't.
And
There are
then
only
we have a
two.
parking problem. I think that's what we're concerned about.
Well, there aren't 3 or 4 docs in the office. We don't have that. So that's
So you're willing to stipulate the fact that there won't be more than 3 doctors at any given time?
there's 2. That's what we have. We have a total of 4 on staff with 2 people there. I mean, If you look at our stuff, we have 6 or 8 doctors. One is an anesthesiologist. He never comes. So, you know,
I'm not just, there's a parking problem in that little part of the world, and what we don't want is people parking across the street in the restaurant, and running across Livingston Avenue, late for their appointment. Then your neighbor gets mad, and somebody gets hurt, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
So I guess I have a question of how many total employees will be there? Not just dentists, not just treating physicians,
there
but
would be roughly 8 employees at the practice.
you have 8? Okay.
8.
And on the architectural drawings, I counted 9 rooms that are, appear to, that the picture shows them having a dentist chair with a little aperture. You're saying there wouldn't ever be 9 people in one in each one of those rooms?
I wouldn't even know how to deal with 9 people in the office at one
Okay.
time.
Well, unless
Certainly
you
wouldn't be
had
able to
5
park 'em.
dentists there or something. That's the concern.
And when our architect goes through the floor plan, if there's any questions, we could, Mr. Stein or Dr. Stein will be here, so we can bring him back up to address any questions as we go through the floor plan again.
Any other questions? Any members of the public, questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, my next witness is Matthew Wilder. He's a professional engineer with Morgan Engineering.
I saw this.
Do you swear the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Please give us your full name and spell your last name.
Matthew Wilder, Wilder. I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. I have not had the pleasure of appearing before this board in the past, but I have been before 50 boards on 275 applications. For what it's worth, I'm also a professional planner. I'm not testifying as a planner tonight, and a certified floodplain manager and a certified municipal engineer. So I look forward to providing this board some background on the property and what we're looking to do this evening. Thank you so much. And I'll stand over there because I do have a few exhibits that I'll present.
Please, yep, that'd be great, thank you.
So before I delve into our application, I'd like to give a little bit of a history of the property itself, and I'm sure this board can probably school me on the history of this property. But the property is commonly known as 505 South Livingston. It's lot 55 within block 2700. Based upon tax records and some historical aerial imagery I took a look at, development on the property dates back to the late 1950s. And what you see now is what's historically been on the property. I can't speak to all the historical uses that have been present, but the most recent use was an automotive repair shop. The site, as it's configured now and has been for the last 65 years, the building is pushed up against South Livingston Avenue, and you have parking in the rear. At one point, there was striping that you could see on aerial imagery. That has long since faded. And while we are, and I'll speak to it a little bit in greater detail, we are increasing impervious surfaces on this site nominally, and that increase is simply because the property has fallen into a state of disrepair and nature has begun retaking some of the existing asphalt. Predominantly, the property going back decades was 100% impervious and fully developed. So again, this aerial exhibit gives the board a little bit of a background. The ShopRite building is over here, which is part of the shopping center. Dunkin' Donuts fronts on East Northfield Road. The property is immediately adjacent to the Capital One Bank. So just to sort of acclimate the board to the subject property.
Well, do we need to mark that as Exhibit A1?
So I have handouts as well. I don't know if the board would, sure, let me just grab them out of my bag.
And we can mark the handout then as Exhibit A1. Okay. Are you ready to talk about it? Yeah. Okay. Is there an extra one for me to hold on to that I mark it?
There's 15 total, so I think we should have.
I'm gonna hold on to one. If somebody doesn't get one, I'll
Yeah.
use my copy.
All right. So moving on to what we're here proposing this evening, and I have blow-ups of these individual pictures as well. So what this is on the left side of this plan, this is a 3D photo inlay.
Thank you.
The left side, the top picture, the top left represents the front of the building. So this is what you'll see from Livingston Avenue. And the bottom left represents what you would see from the rear, the parking lot in the rear. So again, the photos that are being handed out are just the same 4 photos on this exhibit, just blown up, easier to see. The photos on the right side of the property, or right side of the plan, are essentially the same perspective as the 3D photo inlays to give the board a sort of an understanding or an idea of what exists now and what our proposal is to build. So off to the left side in the top 2 photographs, you'll see a sort of purple building. That's, I believe the name is Viva Guacamole, the Mexican restaurant.
Yes.
Yes.
Would you like to take a quick pause and
Sure.
we'll identify them, just so we know what we're marking? Matt, if you could just explain, there's how many pages there are, just briefly what they are on your handout.
Sure.
And we'll mark each one of these, or I'm sorry, all of these collectively as A2.
Sure. So the first 2 photographs you see are 3D photo inlays, and they are on the left side of the plan that is shared on the screen. The top left picture is looking south from South Livingston, and the bottom left picture is looking north from the parking lot towards the subject building.
And the first 2 overlays were prepared by you?
That is correct. They were prepared by my office, and obviously in concert with the architect regarding colors and finishes, but my office prepared the 3D photo inlays.
Okay, and just for purposes of the record, I'll just go back and identify the exhibit that you had marked as A1 is titled an aerial exhibit of Lot 55, Block 2700, Township of Livingston, prepared by Morgan Engineering and Surveying, and it is dated November 21st, 2023?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Just for what it's worth, that aerial is a September of 2023 aerial, so it's a fairly recent aerial and very provides an accurate representation of the subject property. So moving on to the remaining 2 pictures of Exhibit A2, which are the existing site photographs. The top right is, again, sort of matching the perspective of the front 3D photo inlay, and that's taken from South Livingston Ave looking at the property. And then the bottom right, again, was taken from the parking lot looking towards the rear of the existing building. So you'll notice the loading docks on both the overhead garage doors on both the front and the rear, which is consistent with an automobile service use. So I think it's probably easiest to walk the board through our proposal this evening from the aerial imagery. And for the most part, we're very much in matching what exists out there now. We're proposing all of the parking for the site located in the south of the site in the rear. And we are milling and overlaying the existing asphalt where it can be milled and overlaid, and if there's been base failure or if it's just in too poor condition, we'll be doing full depth pavement. So all of the asphalt found on site will be completely refreshed as part of our application. It also includes modifications to provide for handicap accessibility. That is something the site does not have now. It doesn't have any striping or signage for handicap accessible parking, nor do the grades on site work for accessible parking. So we are, if you refer to the grading plan that was submitted as part of my site plans, we are proposing some grading modifications in the rear of the building. That is, which includes a retaining wall. That allows us to sort of flatten out where the parking is proposed for the handicap accessible folks so that they have a flat landing and area to get to park, get out of their vehicle, and then get into the building. So in total, we're proposing 17 parking spaces. We do meet code, and again, we can have some discussion regarding the unheated, unfinished, essentially second-story storage area. We did not include that in our parking calculation. When you look at the site plan, we have a little bit of a unique configuration with respect to parking. It's a pretty tough site. It's a very narrow site. So once you provide your minimum drive aisle width and your minimum parking space size, by virtue of the fact that we could not get an easement from the adjacent property owner, you're stuck sort of parking and turning around on this site to leave to go to South Livingston. So what we've put in the rear of the property is 4 employee-only parking spaces that sort of act in tandem. And the reason we're proposing employee-only parking spaces in those areas is because we can control them. So you'll notice that the parking spaces sort of block one another, but we're able to coordinate by scheduling the employees on site to ensure that any employees who need to leave can park in the 2 southernmost parking spaces. There's a striped turnaround parking. So previously we had 18 parking spaces proposed. On the revised plan, we did eliminate 1. So that allows folks who are parked in those employee spaces in the south to back up and to actually use that turnaround area to pull out head first. Alternatively, they could pull head first into that striped loading area and back into those 2 parking spaces. It just depends on their preference. But once those 2 parking spaces are empty, then the other 2 employee parking spaces can easily be accessed and out. So we have the ability to control those spaces. As Dr. Stein indicated, it's not a high turnover rate. You're talking 45 minutes to an hour for a session. So you don't have a lot of coming and going from the property, but the employee-only spaces are spaces that we're able to control. So while it is a somewhat unique parking design, we don't see any issue with it because, again, the control that we have over those parking spaces. So moving on with a little bit more detail onto grading and really drainage. So as I indicated, there's a nominal increase in impervious surfaces, a little over 1,000 square feet. And as I indicated, that's simply a function of the fact that nature has begun reclaiming this property. Historically, this property was completely developed, but in the southwest corner, what you have now is you have weeds and grass that have grown through the asphalt, and really the property is pretty dilapidated. We're not proposing any stormwater improvements at this time. I've been to this property. I was actually at the property this evening. I thought in the rain, it's a good time to see what happens when it's raining to the surrounding properties. So this property butts up to the ShopRite parking, the ShopRite Shopping Center loading dock. So in the rear of the property, in this loading dock area, there are stormwater inlets that are capturing the stormwater runoff and conveying it downstream. This is actually a pretty common for this part of South Livingston. All of the properties which sort of front on South Livingston and back up to the shopping center drain from the north to the south. They all drain through their properties to the shopping center to the rear. So while we are, again, increasing stormwater runoff nominally with 1,000 square feet of new additional impervious surfaces, we're draining to stormwater inlets that are capturing the runoff before they have any detrimental impacts on any of the surrounding adjacent properties. The areas that abut this property are either drive aisles or off-street parking spaces for the employees or the loading dock for ShopRite. So while we're currently not proposing any stormwater improvements, if the board has concerns, we're happy to have that conversation and see what we can do to address that issue. But considering the historical nature of the property, the fact that from what I can tell and my observations today, there does not seem to be any detrimental impacts currently. Everything seems to be functioning fine. At this time, we're not proposing any stormwater improvements. I'm not. So ShopRite exists about 4 feet below the subject property. For them to modify their property that would cause essentially a damming effect on this property, they would be essentially reconstructing their existing loading dock, it would be a substantial undertaking.
Hopefully this board, they'd be before this board and you wouldn't let them do that, hopefully.
So certainly, minor improvements, a milling and overlaying or resurfacing, while it's possible and we certainly wouldn't have any control over their site improvements, I can't foresee them putting any improvements forth, proposed that would impact this site from a drainage standpoint. We just exist too much higher than their property. So the last really two engineering-related items that we have to speak to, and we have an architect and a traffic engineer, and our traffic engineer is our planner. He'll get more into the weeds on the design of the drive aisles and this, but I wanted to speak to landscaping and lighting. Dealing with landscaping first, this is a pretty tight site, so the only real area where we could propose landscaping to beautify the property is along the frontage of the building. And you can sort of see what exists now on the top right photo or the third photo in your photo packet. There's a very small green area in front of the left side of the building. We are proposing to just sort of enhance that a little bit. That area now leaves a little bit to be desired because, again, it's not really being maintained. We're not proposing additional landscaping in the rear at this time because we're maintaining the existing 5-foot setback on the west side of the site. We don't really have room to put additional plantings. If we put additional plantings, the likelihood of their survival is pretty slim when you consider just how small of an area they're being planted in. So right now, the only proposal for landscaping, as I indicated, is some foundation plantings to sort of complement beautification of this building and to sort of improve the streetscape. Were they part of the?
They were, I believe, they were at the track hearing, and they didn't have any comments specific to the landscape because of those issues. Yeah, but we didn't meet with them independently. Yeah.
Sorry about that. You should probably circle back with the bid and you want to match what's on either side of you.
Sure.
What you got going on here, I think could probably be improved by them. They have a landscape architect. We could soften it up a little bit, decrease your impervious, make it really attractive.
Sure, and we certainly understand that. Our overarching theme for this property, obviously, Dr. Stein thinks it's an appropriate place for his practice, but the overarching theme from my standpoint, I'm sure the architect would echo my sentiment, is that this property needs a little bit of love.
Yeah.
And we're trying to do that as part of this application. So even in the rear, you'll notice we're showing some plantings in planters. Again, we don't have the space for formal plantings, but we're trying to incorporate things that really do beautify the property. So we certainly have no issue re-engaging bid to find out if they have some recommendations that would really enhance the streetscape.
And I would recommend just trying to find a little bit more pervious rather, some beds, with like a walkway coming off of the sidewalk that makes it more professional, more interesting.
In the front of the building?
Yeah, in the front
Sure.
of the building.
Sure.
This has kind of an institutional feel to it that you don't need.
Sure. And we do have some wider sidewalks, so I think we probably can come up with a more complementary design in the front. So we certainly will look at that.
You're going to have to eliminate a curb cut and do other work out front, so obviously this is a great opportunity to get a consistent look with the bid.
We're not, so the driveway is staying as it's currently?
No, there's a curb cut for the entrance to
Oh,
the existing building.
Understood, to the overhead garage doors.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure, yeah, again, no issue whatsoever. We'll re-engage bid and talk about dressing up the front of the property.
Have you looked at whether or not there are any environmental problems as a result of the prior use?
There was an LSRP that did an investigation, and they issued a letter indicating that it was clean. I have a copy of it here. I forget.
If it's not already been submitted, you ought to do so.
I can do so. I will make sure that I submit it to the board, but I'm stating on the record that it has been investigated and there are no contamination issues.
Thank you.
Who issued that report?
I'm sorry, the question?
Who issued the letter you referred to? Well, they're looking for that refuse?
Sure, so we don't really need an enclosure for this use. This is a very low trash generator, and some of the waste that's generated is medical waste. Medical waste can't even be stored outside. So really what's going to happen is it's going to be by a private hauler with trash cans, and we're going to roll them out to South Livingston on the days they're going to be picked up versus having a trash enclosure. Obviously, for a site of this configuration, a trash enclosure creates some practical difficulties with circulation, which is why another reason we think the proposed use and the amount of trash that it generates is really an appropriate use for the property because it doesn't need a dumpster. So really all you need is a few robo-cans that are picked up once a week or twice a week, due to the fact that it's by a private hauler, we have the means where we can increase or decrease the frequency of pickup. And the medical waste is picked up completely separately from that, where someone comes into the building and they remove it directly into their vehicle and take it off-site.
But I mean, right now, you're talking about somebody rolling a garbage can out through the front across the sidewalk to South Livingston Avenue to get picked up?
Correct. Or again, depending upon the private hauler. Some private haulers they use, for lack of a better term, a large pickup truck where they could come into the site, grab the trash, and then leave the property. We've not yet engaged a private hauler as to the means of pickup. If the board is concerned that they don't want trash cans on South Livingston, we will coordinate with the private hauler to make sure they come into the property.
I assure you they don't want trash cans on South
Sure.
Livingston Avenue.
Okay. So what we'll do is we'll coordinate with the hauler who can send a vehicle that can come onto the property without creating any traffic or access-related issues.
Yeah, we need,
Is that a
we want to see
variance?
something specific
Is
to
that a variance, though, to have a commercial building that doesn't have a dumpster?
Yeah, I think we have some situations right now that exist in a number of different properties where there's literally no garbage, and in some cases, literally, they take it
People are
home
gonna eat
themselves.
lunch and stuff, like, there's gotta be some.
Don't disagree that there's gotta be, there doesn't necessarily have to be an enclosure, I don't believe. Peter, you're
There
smarter
is a
than me.
requirement for enclosure under the parking ordinance.
Okay.
So it would require a variance.
Okay,
There is also a requirement for a loading space,
Right,
20
right.
feet by 6 or whatever it is.
Right.
that was next.
And that's not provided, so you're going to have to address that issue as well.
Sure. So, dealing first with the trash enclosure. I can speak to my firm. My firm has an office, and we have 30 people, and we permit walk-ins, much to my chagrin, where clients will just walk in and inquire about our services. We get trash pickup once a week. This is an office with 8 employees, the typical shift, and the folks coming to the property are not going to generally create trash. There'll be some medical waste associated with the procedures they're having performed, but most general offices are a higher generator of trash than medical offices, especially when you consider the bifurcation of general waste versus medical waste. So I think without question that a trash enclosure is unnecessary, and simply to put a trash enclosure on the property to eliminate the need for a variance, to me, it's a better planning alternative. And again, I'm sort of stepping on my planner's toes, but it is a better planning alternative to provide the service that you need versus putting a trash enclosure where you have to have a garbage truck come into the property. As it relates to the loading zone, again, this isn't, the deliveries that this site is going to get is paper, office supplies, equipment for the actual procedures themselves. Those are going to occur at the largest box vans, but probably for the most part, Sprinter vans. They're just going to occupy parking spaces when they're coming to drop off equipment. So again, when you look at the constraints of this property, to provide a loading zone is practically impossible, because it's either going to it's going to coincide with parking spaces, it's going to block a drive aisle, and it's just not needed. There are no tractor trailers making deliveries to this property, as I'm sure there's no tractor trailers making deliveries to most of the properties which front on North Livingston Ave. So again, I think just to provide a loading zone to check the box, I think providing something that's not needed is inappropriate, especially when you're dealing with the site constraints that we have here.
I don't see any need for a loading zone, but you gotta have a garbage plan.
Sure.
You gotta have some kind of plan, like dragging cans out to Livingston Avenue is probably not gonna work.
So right now,
Maybe you have a rubber thing with 2 garbage cans in it in the back.
sure.
something so that somebody, the garbage isn't blowing around and it can get picked up in a logical way.
Yeah.
Either that or you have to keep it inside, because we do that with the residences where all the garbage is collected outside, inside, and then when the garbage collection comes in, they pull it outside, and we approve that all the time.
Yeah, but those are special compacting refrigerated rooms, not,
Well, they're also generating substantially more garbage than
Definitely.
we're talking about. But there needs to be a plan, and I don't disagree.
And we have room. So again, that 5-foot grass strip on the west side of the site, where it's really a little bit too tight to put landscaping, we can certainly accommodate a small fenced-in enclosure with a couple of RoboCans that they would be stored in there. And then when somebody comes to the site, they would come into the site to pick up, they'd pick up the trash and they'd leave.
perfect.
No one, as far as the town's concerned, trash doesn't exist on this property.
Right, and we could also condition the garbage pickup to be before 9 AM, which is when the business opens, so that there'll be plenty of time for the trucks to enter the premises, pick up the garbage, turn around and leave without having any other, vehicles on site. So I think that would be an
And
accommodation.
recycling will have to be done as well, so there has to be some sort of a recycling plan as well.
Sure. Yeah, and like I said, we have the space where we can use that area to create a small enclosure for the RoboCan. It's helpful when you have a use that really doesn't need a large-scale trash enclosure. So we have to make some plan revisions, such as correcting the building height on my plan to match the architectural plans. So our revised plans will also include depiction of this small little enclosure for the garbage cans.
And we'll leave Rocco in charge of that to review it. Thanks,
Sure.
Rocco.
Do we
You have
address
one
the
ADA
signage?
space. Is that van accessible?
Yes, it is.
The signage, do we talk to the architect, or would you be responding to the signage?
I am going to pass the buck on the signage. I
Thank
want to
you.
be a popular guy.
Okay.
So I'll allow my esteemed colleagues to deal with the signage. I'm a simple engineer.
I mean, since you're dealing with site, the other issue that you need to deal with here is snow removal. Do you have a plan for that you want to even discuss? Because there's no place to store it without losing parking.
Correct.
And you can't push it out onto South Livingston Avenue.
Yeah, so the way snow removal would occur on this property is it would simply be pushed into the back of the site. And I'll pull up the aerial exhibit, which is what it occurs, unfortunately, for most of the properties which front on South Livingston that back up to the shopping center. There's no better alternative, and that problem is almost irrespective of the use itself. The property is a very narrow property. They don't want parking in the front yard, so the building is going to be in the front and the parking is going to be in the back. We certainly can talk to the applicant about, what are his procedures when it snows and how they handle appointments. But the short answer is, on a big snowstorm, we would lose most likely the employee-only parking spaces in the rear, those 4 spaces. So we would be short several parking spaces.
So again, a plan should be put into place necessarily, which there are buildings that this takes place with where you need to get a loader and they've got to put it in a truck and take it away, because on a continuing basis, you can't lose 4 spaces in the back.
Sure.
And, if you get a bad winter, they're closed for the few days while they're, but then after that, the parking is going to get lost, and there has to be a plan and some testimony as to what you're going to do.
Do you have parking on the plan at present at the location where the connection to the neighboring property would be if you got an easement? Or is that not used for parking now?
So we have parking because there's no through road, for lack of a better term.
So that is not a spot that would be appropriate for the piling up of snow then?
Well, so if we piled the snow there, we would lose parking space.
Right.
Is the short answer at the present time. So before I sort of turn it over, the last item I wanted to discuss was lighting. So what we're proposing to address lighting is we're proposing one freestanding light in roughly the center of the parking lot on the west side, and that's to illuminate really the parking spaces. Then we're proposing 5 building-mounted lights, 4 on the west side adjacent to the drive aisle, and then 1 facing South Livingston. We do have a little bit of light spillage, which is a function of really the existing building and its proximity to the adjacent property lines. But when we designed the proposed lighting, what we did is we chose a lamp that had a wide throw, not necessarily a far throw. So we wanted to illuminate to the left and right of each light instead of illuminating in front of the light. So where we do have the light spillage, it really is only to adjacent drive aisles and parking spaces. It's not to any buildings. All the lights will be shielded, so there shouldn't be any light nuisance on any of the adjacent properties. So we think it's a fairly modest proposal as it relates to lighting, but it does work for the site and ensures safety when they're operating during nighttime hours. I think the only other comment, which was in the engineering review, discussed replacing and upgrading some curb that was in poor condition. We take no issue with that, and that will be depicted on the revised site plan. So at this time, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer
I have a
them.
question about the second floor, the pitched area.
Yep.
Is that a walkable attic?
Our architect will discuss the
discuss that,
interior
okay.
and the layouts of both. Yeah, and we're aware that we need to explain a bit about that, so we will do that.
Only easy questions for the engineer.
Yeah, I don't know if you're the one or if somebody else, but what is the plan to deal with the narrow driveway with people coming and going at the same time and signage and lights or? Or is there a plan?
That is our traffic engineer.
Okay.
And he's going to be the star of the show.
On that one too, okay. Thank you.
But
Anybody else? Any other questions? Any questions from the public?
Any questions for the public for this witness? Rocco?
Yeah, I had one question.
Sure.
What is the, I don't know if you mentioned it already, what's the width of the existing driveway? At like the narrowest point?
10.1 feet.
But that's, so on the plan, it looks like it's 10.1 to the property line. But
Oh, the
driveway's-
actual width?
Yeah,
Sure.
the width of the actual driveway. It looks like it's a little wider than that.
I thought it was 10.1 was drive aisle, but I'll let the engineer do that.
So let me zoom in a little bit. Oops. Oh, no. What? So the pinch point for the driveway, so there is an access easement between this property and the Capital One Bank. So I don't know if it's a little bit hard to see. So the pinch point is right here. And it's about 11 and a half feet from the building to the existing curb. And that would, of that 11 and a half feet, the 1.4 feet is on the adjacent properties located within the easement. So effectively, we do have 11 and a half feet, but because that falls on an adjacent property, we sort of can't take credit for it, which is why the variance request is for 10.1 feet.
Does the driveway narrow as you go back, or do you have that 11 theoretically all the way?
No, so it's a little bit askew. So yes, I guess the short answer is yes. As you come from this point back, it does begin to narrow slightly. Yeah, so at the front of the site,
Not that it matters, you're not going to get two cars by each other.
no, but
What's the difference?
at the front of the
It's
site,
10 feet or 10 and a
you
half.
have almost 16 and a half feet. So still not a lot and still not sufficient for two cars, but you do have a little bit more room just for the purposes of, visibility.
Motorcycle paths.
That's correct.
Sure, or bicycles,
So you-
alternative modes of
I mean,
transportation.
Obviously, a concern is safety. If, a car is pulling up and another car's way down, the guy in the back is gonna back up so that the guy can get through. The concern is somebody that's 3/4 of the way or most of the way up in a car coming in from Livingston Avenue. That car on Livingston Avenue can't back out onto Livingston Avenue. That's a danger. And the guy here has gotta back up, 30 or 40 feet to let somebody in. That's a problem.
It's obvious that we're going to have questions for the traffic engineer and
Sure
for the
are.
planner.
Yeah, but they need to think about that.
So it's good to have this
Down
heads
here.
up, yes.
And without going into too much on that topic, I mean, we've had conversations about this. We pursued probably more than we should have easements in a very diligent fashion because we knew this was an issue and we knew this was a concern. And we equally have the same concern. But I think it's important to note, as to the operations, it's a very low turnover use. In the event that they're operating at a 45-minute interval, you might have 7 or 8 clients come in the entire day. So you still have the same issue with, you can't tell somebody not to come 30 minutes early, for instance. But as far as turnover and uses go, this is a fairly low turnover use. So we certainly understand the concern, and we have more direct testimony for it. But it's a concern of ours as well. And hopefully the use, we believe that we can plan accordingly to address that issue.
And it does work next door at the restaurant. It's not perfect, but
Yeah,
it works.
As our planner will mention, it's certainly not the only,
Right.
certainly not the only, property that is faced with this situation in town, and other properties seem to have made it work. And much more high turnover properties as well.
And when you address that issue, keep in mind that there was a prior use which probably had arriving vehicles going in the front garage door and vehicles going through that building and then coming out through the driveway. And you might make a comparison as to how that worked as against what you're proposing.
I mean, one of the possibilities, and again, I don't know if it's you or going to be your, again, my biggest concern is the person coming in off of Livingston Avenue and starting down and having nowhere to go, and then either making somebody try to back up what's, I don't know, 30 feet or more, which is pretty difficult depending on, who the driver is of that car. If there's maybe a bailout point in the front that used to be a driveway, that
Yeah.
you could do something with.
The
Right.
point is, you know what the concerns are, and presumably your experts are going to be giving us some
This was a detractor,
testimony.
would be beating it to death on this one to come back here ready with an answer, so it's not an easy one.
Any other questions?
Parking lot and go ahead
Thank you so
Great,
much.
thank you very much.
That's right. I think they're loading dock in the back.
What was I, lunch? Thank you for the reminder. I usually forget.
You bring us cookies?
Yeah, where are the cookies?
That's not a box of cookies?
He got in trouble last time.
Serious.
Cookies on the table.
You going to get the cookies? No. No, thank you. Bathroom soon.
We still moving forward?
Yes.
Okay.
You swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Right, give us your full name and business affiliation.
Mark Teichman, T-I-C-H-M-A-N. Mark Teichman, architect. I received my Bachelor of Architecture from NJIT in 1987. I've been a licensed architect in New Jersey since 1990. And I've had my own practice, which is currently located in Seabright since 1999. I'll mention, just as a point of interest, I was employed in the early 90s by Marty Feitlowitz here in town.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Any questions from the board? The board accepts you as an expert in architecture. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Teichman, please give the benefit of the board to walk us through the plan, touch on some of the questions that have arisen.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I think we can handle it. Don't go too far.
I will.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, perfect. The existing building, I believe, was built in 3 phases, as you see, as you look down the driveway. Some of the components of the building are in better shape than others. There is the beginnings of some structural concerns, both with the walls, the masonry, and the existing roofing. Our proposal, as you see, is to completely refurbish the walls. It'll be a drive-it type material that'll add insulation and a stucco type finish to the exterior. And then remove the entire flat roof and add a pitched roof that would provide some storage area. The attic is, and I'll get into some of the dimensions of the attic, it's really just a storage attic. The heights are very limited, and it complies with, it does not comply with what would be considered a half-story, but I'll get into the specifics on that. Just looking back at the exterior proposal, we're looking at a lot of glass area to make the building welcoming, some decorative columns, and to add some natural light in the building. The upper glass area in the rear would be over the waiting room, which would be like a lofty space. With regards to the signage, in the front, we see the multiple aspects of the business presented in one sign with one common background. The illumination would either be with channel letters, so it would be rear illuminated, or it would be face letters with indirect lighting shining on it. On the side of the building, we simply have the 505 address number, and in the rear, we have just the Northfield sign that would not be illuminated. So we see that we're presenting 3 signs. Obviously, the sign in the front, spelling out all the different activities that are being proposed in the business. Let me get to the plan. Looking at the floor plan, the entrance would be in the rear into a waiting room, and we can walk through, but it's the typical type of amenities that you'd have in a dental office. There are 9 treatment rooms, but different treatment rooms are serving different functions. In the center part of the plan is the sterilization area and lab. There's a staff conference room, and the rooms along the front are the private offices for the doctors. So the building does not have a basement, and there's a critical need for storage. And so this is, in my discussions with the doctor, definitely needed storage beyond what we could provide at the base level. And that was the reason for the attic. In our early discussions about the attic, we were thinking of just doing a pull-down stair. But, the idea of staff members using a pull-down stair was a concern just from a safety point of view. So we decided to dedicate the space on the first floor to get a more conventional stair, just for safety considerations.
What are you storing? Aren't all records in the cloud?
I think the doctor would have to get into the specifics of what's being stored.
And would you agree that you couldn't really have commercial use up there without an elevator?
Okay, let me get to the attic plan, just so you get a sense of how tight it is really in the attic. This, zoom back, between the knee walls, the height at the knee walls, as you see on the attic plan, would be about 4'8". The area of width that would provide the 6'6" height, which is the criteria to determine whether this is a half-story, that would be about 11'4" wide. So we have a shaft of space, 11'4" wide, that's at 6'6". So it's a tight attic. You know, this is not a spacious area that you could break it up into offices and have human occupancy.
Let me just ask a question at this point. If the application were to be approved, would there be agreement to a condition that the attic could not be used for anything other than storage that's consistent with the fire code?
Yes, 100%. It's not the intent of the applicant to use it for anything other than storage, and we would certainly consent to that being a condition of any approval.
Thank you.
Good job.
The floor area provided with that 6'6" height is approximately 815 square feet. So it's well less than half of the approximately 3,500 square feet that the first floor is. Okay. I got one other tidbit on it, but we can get back to it.
Yeah. I don't know if you did yet, Mark, can you please confirm the building height, which was asked before you got up here?
Right. So the existing building height to the flat roofs, which are at various heights, is about 14 foot 2 inches in the front of the building, about 15 foot 2 inches in the back of the building, since the site grades down. The proposed building height is 27 foot 6 inches with a ridge.
And that's within the permitted
That's
bulk
correct.
standards? Okay.
That's correct.
You mentioned windows. You mentioned windows.
That's correct.
Is that clear glass, frosted glass, or what?
It would be clear glass.
In the front of the building, on the ground level, would be clear glass?
There might be some tint to it, but it's not looking into treatment rooms.
No, it's looking into two private offices.
Private offices. As far as tinting the glass and possible window treatments, you know, we need to look into that.
The reason the question is being asked is because the code requires clear, transparent glass unless you have no more than 50% tinting. So just keep that in mind.
We will comply
If
with
there's an
that.
approval, you'd have to comply with that.
That's correct. All right.
Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no.
Three.
Just before you leave the signs, the sign in the front. I know, well, he mentioned the signs, he was hoping to skip along. The dimension of the sign, is that within, forgetting the number of the sign, is the dimension of the sign within the ordinance? As a percentage of front facade?
If this is considered one sign, it complies with the ordinance.
Got it. Seems
If
like
I
a big percentage.
arrived as a patient on foot or by bus and walked in, how do I get into the building? Thank you.
Not even 10 o'clock yet.
You should know that by now.
All right, I'll repeat it again and ask an expert to respond.
The main
If I
entrance,
ride by foot, or if I come by bus and therefore have to walk in, how do I get into the building?
you would walk down the driveway to the main entrance, which is in the rear of the building.
Okay, then I'm going to ask you to address another requirement of our code, which is the primary entrance toward and accessible from the street, and all ground floor occupancies must have their primary pedestrian access from the street. Your access for patients all is in the rear of the building.
That's
The only
correct.
way you can get there is by car or by walking in the driveway where cars are going and there's no sidewalk. How do you comply with the requirement of our ordinance or get us to say you don't have to comply for some reason?
The configuration of the building on the site and the, the adjacency of the parking suggested that the main entrance and the waiting room be in the rear of the building. So if we need to start talking about a waiver on that requirement,
Right, so again, as we heard from our engineer, this is a very difficult site. We all understand that. It has some very tight constraints on the property as it's existing, as it was previously approved for, some of these constraints.
The code also requires that any request for that deviation has to be presented in writing with the application.
So
What are we going to do without it?
putting that particular procedural issue aside, just for the benefit of the board, as we mentioned, this is a bit of a unique practice. It is not, there is no, it's by appointment only, so there's not going to be any walk-in traffic where someone's walking by, their tooth hurts, or Mr. Ratner thinks he might need a crown, and he walks
Counselor,
in.
that's all very interesting, but we need a professional to testify.
I understand. I was just summarizing the testimony of Dr. Stein, but I understand.
Something to consider might be to put a buzzer on the front. No, but it's an easier waiver, right? If somebody could get a buzzer and then the people in the back could buzz them in, then you don't have to walk down the dangerous driveway.
I just asked the doctor, there's no problem with making provisions for patients to be able to enter into the front door.
But according to what Mr. Klein said, it has to be the main entrance, so you're still going to need to get a variance or, well, be a variance. But the concept of being able to get in the front, which is what Mr. Santola was talking about, is important too, so you're not walking down that driveway and a buzzer to get in that door so that.
And if that is the approach, we would probably want to hear some testimony about whether it has any impact upon patient privacy and other issues that the practice might be concerned about.
All right.
Traffic engineer going to comment on all of these problems over here, because we were dumping everything.
Well, luckily, he's also a professional planner, so the more hats you wear, the more questions you answer.
That's fair.
Your plans show,
Is he getting paid twice?
your plans show some kind of projecting canopy at the front of the building?
That's correct.
How far does it project? Thank you.
Are there other questions from the board? Are there any more questions for the architect from?
I think
Go
Mr.
ahead, Rosie.
Bergoli has a
I have
question.
a question about signage. The back looks really great. The front, not so much. It's a little busy.
There's a lot to say.
Yes.
In
Can
the
we
old days,
talk
it would have
about
just said Dr. Silver.
Can we talk about it? There's so much being said. It's quite busy from the front. The back of the building would be most appropriate for the front of the building. in my opinion.
Uh,
It's not supposed to be a billboard.
As I say, there's a lot going on in the building, there's a lot that's part of the practice, and the doctor definitely expressed a desire to project that to the world.
Right, but signage is not, like, when we approve even other signage for, I could say as recently as a prior signage that we just approved for a, was it the synagogue, the shul? They wanted all that too, and we kind of felt that it was also very busy. It's not usually what the planning board approves, it's not consistent with the look of, you know, the street or other signage that's there. So one signage detailing who's located there, but every single thing that's being done in the building on the signage it's kind of like more of advertising than signage to let someone know what's located in the facility.
Right, so if I could just interject, because I recall that I happened to have been here for the synagogue signage and the issues, and I believe the concerns of the board were that they didn't really provide you any benefit. They were actually just sort of giving a thank you to the donors. Here, if you were to make an appointment, say, with the sleep apnea center, and you arrived and all it said was the dental group, you wouldn't be, you might not be able to identify the building on this traffic and busy road. So there is a benefit to having identifying the names of the business that are going to be operating at this facility, similarly to the fact that we are using up a sign technically for 505, when that's just, again, for identification so that people can locate the building and be able to identify which building is ours.
So are there 3 businesses or 1 business? Because you just said to identify the businesses that are going there.
So Dr. Stein testified earlier how the interplay of those 3, and there's sort of, he stated it better than I can, so I can have him say it again, but he had testified how the 3 entities are intertwined.
Has the bid looked at this and opined on it?
It was, I believe, it was part of our, the track hearing. It was the same signage as the track hearing, and they took a look at it. I think the only issue was with illumination.
The bid normally has a committee to which the signage is presented. They make a recommendation to us. There may be a solution to the problem that we're concerned about. It's possible that you'd have at the front the same sign as in the back.
Mm-hmm.
The facades ordinance allows you to have a sign painted on a window. So you could have the 2 types of practice, one on one window and one on the other window, which then is visible to anybody driving by. So consider that as a possibility, which might avoid all the concerns that we have about clutter on the sign that is on the wall out front.
It does look quite cluttered compared to the back sign, which is very neat and clean and tells you exactly what the practice is.
Also against the big white background, I think makes it even look busy.
Not beating this to death, but beating it to death a little bit more.
Flog on.
The doctor, when he testified, or was asked how somebody knows what the practice is that's going on there, he indicated if you've got the problem, you know where you're coming. So you just sort of beat yourself up with regard to having to do that advertising, and now you just need to tell people where you're at in lieu of, I apologize, but the billboard approach that's on there now with everything that you're doing in there. And I think if they know whatever you wish to call your office is there, that a simplistic approach to that would accomplish what you're doing. You're looking for a lot of other variances here, and I think the board is looking to try to accommodate. And even though this may meet the requirements, we're asking for some consideration on your part for the streetscape, that it's not looking the way it's being proposed now.
I would add too, that if I'm going for the first time, these types of facilities, I assume, are destination. I know where my dentist office is. I could get there with my eyes closed. But the first time I'm going, it's going to be on my my GPS, right? So the 505 to me is the most important thing, and you've got that around the corner because I'm gonna be putting in sleep apnea. It's gonna come up 505 Northfield, and then I'm gonna be driving Livingston Avenue, and I wanna be able to see the 505. If I'm coming from the ShopRite direction, you can't even see it. So I think you made such an effort to get all that signage on the front, you buried the lead on the side of the building. That's just my thought.
I could put a 505 in the front, but
No.
where
We
it's,
could squeeze it in. We could squeeze it in somewhere.
They would not fit.
You could get one of those white rocks like I have in front of my house.
Just give it some thought is the bottom line.
yes,
Yeah.
okay.
You know, again, we also discussed internally whether or not, I think the doctor may, I don't know if he prefers it, but we discussed putting a monument sign in the front, which may be able to address some of these issues, but we know that's not permitted in the zone, even though it's sort of prevalent in that little area. I mean, I believe it's the building next door has a monument sign, the building across the street has monument signs, but it's not permitted in the zone, and that's why we took the approach that we did. That's one of the reasons why we took the approach that we did. So I don't know if the board had any comments on that or concerns, but if that was an option that we would be able to utilize to alleviate some of these issues, it would be something we also could present.
I wouldn't object to that, although I think the one part that's tricky here is creating that doesn't block your vision pulling out. That's because we've had that when the buildings are closer to the street, the sight triangle's tricky. But I'm agreeing with Rich. I think everyone's trying to work with you here to get a dilapidated building back into the mix. We just gotta find some happy mediums.
I do appreciate that you're willing to take on this project. We obviously in town, it is an eyesore, and we would love to see it be, well, when it's put back up and it's beautiful, we want it to look as equally beautiful for the neighborhood. So that consideration, if you would take that, we would appreciate it.
I think
You're
you have,
spending the money and the time, we want it
Let me
to.
just throw out one question that's just been bouncing around in my head, not necessarily germane to the application, but given the extent of the renovation that you're having to do, where you're basically stripping it down, redoing the walls, was there any consideration of just building a new building? That's what I would. It just seems like it's an awfully expensive renovation.
There are some technical challenges in doing that, one of which is there's a party wall with the adjacent building. So we went in this direction.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public or from our professionals? Seeing none. Do you have any more questions for this witness?
I do not.
Okay, so why don't we move on then?
Oh, yeah, well, it's late. Richie was just saying it was late.
I don't know. Why don't we find out? There's certainly,
Well, the traffic engineer is
yeah, and then I'll ask. Go ahead, once we swear him in.
Okay. Do you swear the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, please give us your full name, spell your last name, and give us your business affiliation.
My name is Matthew Seckler, that's Seckler. I'm with Stonefield Engineering Design. Address is 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey. This application, I'll be the traffic engineer and planner.
I'm sorry, where in New Jersey?
Rutherford?
Why don't we go through your background?
Perfect. I was waiting for someone to ask. I don't
Yeah.
want to just brag. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Union College. I have a Master's in City and Regional Planning from Rutgers University. Licensed professional engineer in the state, also professional planner in the state. Also recognized professional traffic operations engineer by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. Been accepted for over 150 boards as both a traffic engineer and planner in the state.
Any questions from the board? Any objections?
Do you testify as a planner often,
Yes,
independently from your traffic expertise?
yes. Wherever they need me, I show up.
It is, we don't see that, that's why I asked the question.
Well, like I said, I went back to school to become a planner and then stayed a traffic engineer, and it kind of came together, so.
It's usually the older engineers who used to be able to just send in a
Take the-
check and get the planning
Exactly.
license.
Last night I had a hearing, and the board planner said, this is the one planner that I accept that's an engineer. So I appreciated that, feedback.
So the board, so the board accepts you as a traffic engineer and a planner,
Certainly.
expert in planning. Just from a timing, what do you think?
Yeah, so we have, Mr. Seckler is going, he's our traffic engineer, he's going to discuss the traffic. You guys run that a little bit on how many questions and how bad you want to beat him up on it. And then he's also our planner, who's going to give us some planning testimony. I understand that it's getting late. I'd like to at least try to, if possible, to get his planning testimony forward, and maybe we could, see if there's any issues, and then if we have to come back to give the planning testimony, we can do that as well.
So you're going to do traffic first and then?
Well, we were going to do the traffic, right, to get the traffic testimony out there.
Right,
The
okay.
planning testimony was going to address the traffic testimony, even though it's the same person, but if we have to come back because it's late, I
Right, I
understand
think it'd
that.
be good to get that out here first.
That's what we'd like to do.
Okay, great.
Thanks. And again, from a traffic perspective, again, this is one of those applications where I don't show up with like a 50-page amount of analysis in terms of showing you what the level of service is going to be, because as you heard, the level of traffic that's being generated from here is a very low amount of traffic. You got 8 employees, generally they're coming in and leaving maybe once a day. Maybe they'll go out to lunch or they'll walk to ShopRite. And then you have the patients, which, you're looking at basically 2 patients coming and going every 45 minutes to an hour. Very, very low trip generation. So, this is not type of project where in terms of, how will the nearby the intersections, how will, the driveways to the ShopRite be affected? This is a drop in the bucket in terms of the traffic you expect. The 20 to 25,000 vehicles per day that drive up along South Livingston Ave, this is a drop in the bucket. And also, generally outside the peak hours. You heard that it opens at 9 a.m. That's generally, a little after most of the roadway peaks in the area. In terms of the closures, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 6 or 7, but you don't see a lot of traffic during the rush hour. And then Saturdays and Sundays are closed, so you don't have anything interacting with ShopRite's busiest time periods as well. But really what we're looking at from this site is really the site circulation and parking aspects. And again, you've heard operationally how this parking will work. In terms of the site access on and off, we have the site, we have the building, we have the driveways that exist there today. I've heard a lot of discussion and kind of listening to the board's concerns. I think there are a couple things that we could do to remedy some of the traffic concerns, because obviously we can't fix it. We can't all of a sudden get a 24-foot wide drive aisle or 20-foot wide drive aisle on this lot that's 50 feet wide and the building takes up the vast majority of it. One of the things we can do is, and I'm trying to look behind me, but maybe I'll just looking forward and use my mouse, is create a driveway opening between the building and the street that basically flares out a little wider. Because as we said, this is not a condition that's unique. In fact, the property that we share the lot line with to our west, the Mexican restaurant, they do have kind of a sweeping entry that then narrows down as you get into their driveway. They have a wider driveway that basically then narrows down so you get to that single lane to go around the back. So what I think we could do here is, right now there's about 15 and a half to 16 feet between the curb on our east, again, not on our property, but the curb on our east, and where we're showing basically the driveway to end. What we probably could do, and I think we could comply with, is flare it out or widen it out so that we have enough space that is more in the range of almost 17 feet, so that wide. So that's really the width of almost 2 compact parking spaces. When you have like 8.5-foot parking space, you basically would have 2 of them side by side. And you've got 15.3 feet to the property line, and then clearly another few feet before you get to the curb. So you almost would have really 2 parking spaces, the equivalent of 2 parking spaces between the narrowest, where the building ends, and the street. So you would have the ability, if one car was coming out and one car was going in, they could sit side by side, similar to, again, 2 parking spaces, just one coming in and one going out. Obviously, there is some signage we could do. We could kind of, bring in one of those double yellow lines to kind of, as people leave the building area, you basically angle it so that the people coming out work themselves to the right side of that, their 8.5 feet of the driveway coming out, so that people coming in would have the ability to enter. We already have a little bit of a chamfer on the curb today, so when I was giving those measurements, I was not accounting for the additional few feet that you kind of have if you're entering and making the right turn into the site. So that's one of the things that we could do. The other item is that anyone who's leaving the site has already entered. So anyone who's experienced coming to this property, they know when they're entering the site that when it's time to leave, they're going to have to be alert to see if someone is basically coming, towards them in the drive aisle. We can add signage in the back of the site that basically says like yield to incoming vehicle, something along those lines. Again, when you're leaving the site, it means you likely have visited the doctor. You go through your checkout. Maybe you have to schedule a future exam. That's obviously a time period that someone who's working the front desk could just be like, just remember, yield to anyone coming out. But again, we definitely could add signage on the rear of the site to help people coming out of the property. I know this is, not the planning portion, but when I do any of these traffic studies, I like to look at what the other acceptable uses in the zone are, because again, this is a low trip generator, even in the medical office industry. If this was a pediatrician that had, basically, flu season hits and all these kids are coming because, they need to get checkups, you could have a rush of people. Here, it's scheduled, everything is scheduled. You could have retail stores, not that I think this would be a great site for a 7-Eleven, but again, you could have a retail store with, frequent interaction coming in and out. Same thing, business offices, eating establishments like the one next door that, again, has that same style driveway. There is already a dentist next to the Ritz Diner that has basically the exact same operation in terms of the size of the driveway. In fact, I don't think they have the width that we could propose here in our driveway. They basically have almost what looks like what we're showing in the plan here, with about maybe 11 or 12 feet at the property line when you enter the dentist that's next to the Ritz Diner. Even across from that dentist is a Verizon building. I think at least was a Verizon building. Also has, a single driveway. I don't know how active that ever was, but basically a single driveway that looks no more than 12 feet wide that goes to a back parking lot that is, self-contained and landlocked. So again, as was mentioned earlier, this isn't unique. It's not ideal, but I think that this is the type of operator, this type of traffic amount that can work with this type of operation. I do think, listening to the board, to provide that, kind of wider area, kind of staging area, trying to leave the site is something that we could propose and add to the site plan, and really would have, I think, a benefit to this project versus, try to keep this building and provide a use in this building. Parking, again, you heard the justification for variance is needed based on the storage upstairs. Again, we've already stipulated this upstairs would just be storage, but if we do need a variance, one, you've heard from the operator in terms of how the site is staffed. Clearly, if you add those 8 employees, the 2 patients, you're at 11. Even if 2 more patients show up early, you still have enough parking spaces on site. So I don't see an issue as it comes to, the parking quantity that we have on this property. And again, you heard testimony about the loading. Just trying to go through the various traffic things that may also become planning. You heard about the loading. I don't think is necessary for this type of site. You heard about the trash pickup. Again, this is a site that has clearly a lot of off hours that would be appropriate for any type of trash pickup and doesn't have a large amount of trash. So again, in terms of traffic testimony, it really comes down to site circulation. I think you've seen examples of this work in the past. I think we have some strategies that go beyond what is shown in this plan that will help this property really operate as efficiently as possible.
I think that's all the direct testimony we have as far as traffic is concerned from Mr. Seckler.
I think that you've heard from the board the things that we're looking for in order to be able to find a way to come out to an affirmative result. And what we now need is to everybody sit down again and come in with a combination of thoughts which will perhaps enable us to get to that point, which I think is something which you will need time for rather than being able to resolve tonight.
I understand. We heard the concerns of the board. We've, taken copious notes as to the issues and the concerns. I mean, obviously, like we indicated, this is a difficult site, so we knew that there was going to be some concerns. I think we can address a lot of the comments to the satisfaction of this board if we just have a little bit more time to, regroup and think them through. And that's what we would ask this board for. I guess if we can carry this to the next hearing, that would be great. I know Ms. Hollis might have any issues with the scheduling, but I would ask that we can,
Can I just make one
Why
suggestion?
don't we see if there are any other questions, so this way we can get them,
If we're going to come back with something, I want to hear.
Exactly.
If you're
Yeah,
gonna widen up the
right.
driveway, if you're gonna widen up the driveway, that's a
Yep.
perfect opportunity to
Yep.
fix the front landscaping. You could do the whole thing, talk to the bid, widen the driveway, create some soft landscaping in the front with a nice sidewalk. You could do it all at one time, is my
Yeah,
point.
basically comprehensive plan for everything
There
in the
you
front of the
go.
building, sign on out to the street.
It would appear to me that if I were sitting in that offset spot, I wouldn't have much vision down the driveway. In other words, if I'm inside the building lines and there's cars coming down, I won't see them unless you put mirrors up or something.
So just facing this building, but also, your concern is the person who's coming out or the person who's coming in?
Well, no, you said you would you proposed possibly widening the driveway at the bottom
Yeah.
so that you'd have width for a car to pull over and let somebody pass them.
So what my strategy is, you widen it so the person coming out get to a spot to the left of the building. So the person coming in would basically be able to stay
Yeah, I
in line
know.
where they are today. So I know your concern was if they were on this side, the incoming car was on this side, they wouldn't be able to see past the building. I want to leave the car coming in on the right and have the car coming out be able to slide over to the left and have this car still have room where they don't have, they could fit there and not have to back out onto the road.
So there's a restaurant right next door,
Yes.
Viva Guacamole, who has a similar driveway,
Yep.
right? Was that part of your study to see how that is, that the same, I think this is a longer building than Viva Guacamole, though. The
It's a-
span to come out is
Yeah,
much
it's a
longer.
longer building. Obviously, Viva Guacamole has people show up as, they're not timed. They don't say you could come for your tacos at 12.
Correct.
But what they have, again, because their building is on the entrance side, what they've done is that they have like a wider radii entry so that the person who's coming in basically could sit while the person could go out. Basically, they have a wider spot on the right-hand side because that's the side of, the building is on the right side of the driveway. What I'm suggesting is basically the mirror of that. We would go wider on the left-hand side of the driveway when you're coming out because that's the direction of the land that we control. We can't widen anymore in the other direction. So basically, it would be
So
that.
you're mirroring what Viva Guacamole has
Correct,
now?
correct.
Right, just so-
Just reversed.
In dealing with the proposed widening at the Livingston Avenue entrance, would it help to stripe that area to separate the in and out?
Yeah, what I would suggest is from where the building is to the street or to the sidewalk, basically do the double yellow line so that the people coming out know, stay to your right, so people coming in have their ability to come in.
Wouldn't the double yellow line indicate it's not accessible area?
Well,
What do you mean by a double yellow line?
What you see on South Livingston Ave that separates the two directions of traffic. The center line that you see in a road is what we would be mimicking here. That's the indication to basically stay to the right.
I think these are things you're going to come back to us with.
Yeah,
You're
we will
gonna
show it on
us
plan. I'm not.
Where
yeah.
you're going to put the bollards, where you're going to
Right.
protect the building,
Yeah,
where
I'm
you're
not
going to put the
gonna-
lines, where you're going to put the signs, all
Yeah.
that stuff, right?
I don't want to design on the fly, but I want to get any feedback if someone suggests, how about this sign, how about this marking? I want to be able to try to accommodate that.
Any other thoughts that we want to, suggest that they consider? Are we all good?
Yeah, it might make sense too, as long as we have the time to. Just give us a little summary on what you're gonna do with the garbage.
Oh, yes, yeah, we'll come up with a refuse and recycling, I guess, plan or.
Just 5 minutes, so we know that it's gonna be taken care of.
In
Yes.
addition to very copious notes you took, check the record. You may find some more in there from the questions that were being asked or the comments being made, and see what you can cover.
I will do that, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Jackie, do we have another?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we could take them on Tuesday, December 5th, and I don't know if that gives Mr. LaParry sufficient time for that.
12:06, is that enough time?
Well.
And what's the meeting after that?
January 2nd.
So, yeah, I believe if we needed to have, if there was a plan revision and it had to be revised, it has to be in like today to meet the 10 days prior to the next hearing.
Well, we can waive the 10 days.
Right. So,
It's okay, yeah, that's okay. I'm looking at my calendar, I wasn't even paying attention.
12/5, right?
Yes, December 5th.
So our professionals indicated that we may be able to, they could work to get any revisions done in time. The question is just communicating with the bid to see what their input would be. I don't know that we would be able to, I don't know if you have any input on that.
I sent that Livingston text while we were chatting here, so you could call them tomorrow, Monday.
Yeah, I'll call Beth first thing in the morning, and maybe that will, I then can communicate with Jackie, and if it becomes an impossibility. So what I would suggest then, or ask respectfully, is that we carry it to 12/5, and just for notice purposes, and that way, if I can't make it at 12/5, I can let Jackie know right away, and then you can announce at the next hearing when squeeze us in after that.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a note that the board also has another continued matter scheduled for that evening for Summit Medical.
Oh, that's a long one. That's, yeah, what about the next one after the 17th? Yeah, Summit Medical is that night. Yeah, we'll do it at,
Mr. LaParry, the board is going to consider a special for Tuesday, December 19th at 8 p.m.
Okay.
So ignore the offer of December 5th.
Okay, that gives us a little bit more breathing room than scrambling over the Thanksgiving holiday to try to make our plan revisions anyway. And then,
yeah, this I think will make it easier for you, give you a little bit more time.
yeah, absolutely, I agree, absolutely.
Okay.
And
So
that- and that-
19th?
Yeah, and that meeting will begin at 8 p.m.
8 p.m., absolutely. So 12/19 at 8 p.m. Again, I will reach out to Beth Littman in the morning, and if for some reason still, I think that should provide us with enough time at this point, but I will certainly coordinate with you, Jackie, tomorrow or whenever, to make sure that I don't mess up your schedule.
Okay, so the matter is carried to December 19th at 8 p.m. This is your notice. No further notice to the public that will be required.
Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you.
I will, I will.
We're still talking here. We are adjourned.